Can imagination and art bring us closer to truth than science? Well, I studied medicine, so I was raised on a diet of empiricism, rationalism, and reason, the bedrocks of knowledge, or so I thought, until I strayed from science a bit and had a little fling with writing fiction. And that fling turned into something a little more long-term, and I became a novelist. And in this process, something shifted in me. And it seemed to me, and it seems to me now, that science, with its focused beam of objectivity, excludes what's in the periphery, the less tangible aspects of life. And art has a wonderful way of bringing these elements into relief. Let me give you an example of what I mean. I received some feedback on a new novel I'd been working on recently, and it turns out I'd made a classic mistake. I'd written a passive protagonist. My main character had no agency. Now, readers intuitively know that this is unrealistic. A character cannot be passive to the drama unfolding around him, simply because it's not true to life. And here is where literature unveils a deeper truth, that agency is an essential ingredient of the human experience. We need to know that we can take action and affect change in our lives. If this is missing from a book, it will lead to loss of interest. If this is missing from a life, it will lead to despair. But this essential truth is forgotten in, of all places, the world of healthcare. As a doctor, I work in an environment that is essentially designed as a really badly written novel. Passive protagonists abound, thanks to me and my colleagues who educate patients to give up their agency and to submit to their care, whether they're being asked to accept a diagnosis or an intravenous treatment or to swallow the tablets placed before them. Patient passivity is a byproduct of the new healthcare paradigm. And I see this, the removal of patient agency, as one of the most disturbing new realities of conventional medicine. Well, it's clear how we got here. We got here because medicine is not an art that deals with the soul of human experience. Medicine is a science, and it deals in the mechanics of illness. And if science were to have a slogan, it would be science. If it isn't matter, it doesn't matter. Clearly, in this sort of paradigm, fluffy concepts like personal agency have no role. At this point in our cultural evolution, science has become the alpha male. It muscles its worldview around as the only one worth respecting. For a long time now, science has dominated and art pushed to the fringes. And it's left us with this very lopsided dichotomy, where science is about knowledge, which is more important than art, which is about imagination. Science studies the physical world, the world of proof and certainty, more important than art, which plays in the space of the ephemeral and the uncertain. Science explains the universe, whereas art simply experiences the universe. Now, medicine, as a scientific discipline, of course, must obey that matter-based mantra. And of course, it's also brought us a very long way. It's brought us a clear understanding of the cellular and molecular mechanisms of the body, and it's enabled life-saving treatments, both pharmaceutical and surgical. But the hard mechanics of this paradigm continue to push the soft ephemera to the sidelines. And this has resulted in a separation between our true sense of self, that nebulous sense of personal identity that doesn't have a physical home, and our physical sense of self, our bodies. And I feel that this separation is dangerous and disempowering. I met with a new patient the other day. She came in with her husband, and both of them were terrified of the changes in her body. Illness is, in many ways, like a random act of violence. It's like returning to find your home burgled and ransacked, the many personal symbols of your life either lost or forever changed. Overnight, my patient's joints had become swollen and stiff and painful. She was overwhelmed with fatigue. She struggled to do the things that she'd done without thinking. She struggled to get out of bed, to get dressed, to cut her food. She had developed rheumatoid arthritis. I explained the diagnosis and the treatment, which involves strong and sometimes toxic medications, that she will probably need to take for the rest of her life. My patient said, "Thank you very much for all this information. I have just one question. What can I do? What can I do in my life to get myself better again?" She wanted to know how she could clean up her ransacked home and make it familiar again. Well, if I follow the dictums of evidence-based medicine, all I can offer her is the advice of a healthy lifestyle, which she was already undertaking, and the advice to take the medications I'd offered her. The subtext to this conversation is that ultimately there is not much she can do. She is a victim of her biology, and she must learn to live in this new damaged home, violated first by illness and now by medication. The only potential treatment is through tinkering with pharmaceutical spanners, something that is entirely in my control and entirely out of hers. Her agency has efficiently and effectively been removed. I feel this is deeply wrong. In doing this, we separate the person from their body. We drive a stake through their natural sense of being in this world. We do this justified by scientific truths. But is this the whole truth? One of the fallacies of the scientific method is the publication of certain truths and the casual shelving of others. Is it possible that we are doing this on a grand scale by focusing on the mechanical aspects of human nature and ignoring the ephemeral? Are we really just biological machines that, once broken, can only be fixed by drugs or surgery? Do we really have less control over our biological homes than we do our brick-and-mortar homes? And what about that aspect of life that science continues to ignore because it can't be quantified, this rich inner world of ours, the world of imagination and belief, hope and fear? Is this world of the mind truly disconnected from the body? Well, this is what the scientific dogma would have us believe, but I feel it's time to challenge this. And I'd like to walk us through a little exercise. Just imagine that you are waiting in the wings somewhere over there in the dark, waiting for your name to be called so that you can walk out onto this stage, this red spot here, and speak to an audience. Might this situation provoke a change in your body? Well, I can attest to the fact that there is quite a vigorous physical change. A flood of stress hormones are making me feel like my heart is pumping up in my throat, my hands are cold and clammy, my mouth is dry, queasy. I think we've all been there in one way or another. But what provoked this physical change? It was a thought, wasn't it? It was the thought of speaking in public, a concept living entirely in my mind. The thought of public speaking is the modern-day equivalent of the thought of a saber-toothed tiger hiding in the bushes. The fear primes the fight-or-flight stress response, which has evolved to increase our chances of survival if there's an immediate threat to our safety. But here on this stage, on this red dot, there is no threat to my safety, I don't think. There's a threat to my sense of self, a threat to my fragile ego, a concept that lives entirely in my mind. But my biology, all these billions of cells, have responded to this imaginative thought, this complex perception of social risk. Today, here on this stage, my mind has influenced my matter. So there is a relationship, isn't there? It seems from this very simple thought experiment that the mind serves as an intermediary between the environment and our bodies. And it makes sense, doesn't it? Something needs to process the cues from the environment and then signal our body to act. As a primitive species, this link between environment and body was quite linear. You might hear a rustle in the bushes or see a flash of pale color between leaves, equals risk, equals be prepared to fight or flee. But now, millennia later, our nervous systems must process a much more complex world with a much more complex mind. But our biology still really can't tell the difference between a nuanced social fear like public speaking and a true physical threat. It's all processed in the same way, the same physiologic response, regardless of whether you truly need to flee the scene, fight for your life, survive on a red spot for some minutes. So The fear of public speaking is one on an endless list of modern-day equivalents of tigers hiding in bushes, from the threat of an unstable economy, perhaps an abusive relationship, fear of job loss, and perhaps fears and risks that aren't even rational thanks to our imaginations. And as we spend each day worrying about our own unique combination of fears, our bodies obligingly respond, physically preparing us for the worst. Now, this becomes even more interesting when you look at the scientific evidence that shows a clear relationship between psychological stress and physical illness. We now know that illnesses such as heart disease, diabetes, autoimmune disease, and infection are all linked to stress. There's also evidence that your outlook on life matters. Whether you are a glass half full kind of person or a glass half empty kind of person will have an impact on your health. If you happen to view the world through rose-colored lenses, you're actually more likely to live longer, to be healthier, and to overcome illness faster. During that conversation with my patient the other day, she asked me how she developed her arthritis, and I explained to her this link between stress and illness. And as I spoke, she and her husband exchanged looks. She told me that last year her husband had been diagnosed with cancer, and her mother had passed away. It had been a very difficult year. And it seemed clear to all of us there in the room that day that there is an interplay between the outer world, the inner world, and our bodies. It is not all as separate as we've been taught to think. Well, if you look around, some of these ideas have crept into conventional medicine. The NHS now prescribes cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, and mindfulness training as part of the treatment paradigm for mental illness. Leading healthcare institutions like the Mayo Clinic are recognizing that meditation may be beneficial not just for mental health, but for physical health as well. And Harvard University has set up a center designed to harness the potential therapeutic benefits of the placebo effect, another piece of that mind-matter puzzle. But despite all these changes, if you use the words mind and body together in one sentence, you're almost immediately placed into the camp of the quacks and the charlatans. So this is a conversation I've yet to have with my medical colleagues. Medicine is holding fast to the matter-based paradigm. And every day, I see the sense of dislocation my patients feel as we turn the microscope to their matter and ignore their deeper sense of self and related perceptions, beliefs, and fears. So what needs to change? And how can the healthcare system help? Well, we can't control all the sources of stress out there, but we can help patients modify their response to stress. We could do this by offering cognitive behavioral therapy, meditation, and mindfulness training as part of the treatment paradigm for all chronic illness, regardless of whether it's perceived to be above the neck or below it. From a scientific standpoint, we'd simply be modifying a modifiable risk factor. We know that exercise and diet and smoking are risk factors that can be changed. Well, based on the scientific evidence, stress resilience should be on that list. But if we move our gaze away from the scientific microscope for a moment and look at the bigger picture, what else would we be doing if we were to take this step? If we were to recognize this link, this communication between environment, mind, and body, this connection between stress and illness, we'd be doing something much bigger than modifying a risk factor. We would be helping medicine transcend the mechanical. We would be engaging that part of ourselves that transforms us from biological machines to human beings. I would love to be able to tell my patient with arthritis that there is a lot that she can do, that her perception of and response to the world out there has an impact on her world in here, and this is something she can change. Responsibility is the ability to make a response. We'd be giving people this ability, and we'd be returning to them their sense of agency which we know is a critical ingredient of feeling whole and uniquely and beautifully human in this world. Despite the prevailing worldview that draws a line between the real world of matter and the ephemeral world of the imagination, all around us is evidence that life is not so cleanly dissected. And back to our old dichotomies of science and art, matter and mind, experience and creative potential. Well, we all inhabit these dichotomies all day, every day. And so I believe, not necessarily in a worldview, but in a basic truth that we are the compilation of an interplay between the known and the unknowable, and that it's this alchemy that enables us to live creative lives, to be heroes in our own stories, both real and imagined, two worlds that are not so separate after all. They are, in fact, two facets of this one beautiful jewel we call life. Thank you.